When you hear the word epidemic, your mind probably jumps to something contagious, right? Like the flu. But there's this other, much quieter epidemic happening all around us, affecting billions of people. I'm talking about non-communicable diseases, or NCDs, things like heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. So the big question is, how in the world do you fight an enemy that doesn't spread from one person to the next? Well, let's dive in and find out. And that really is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? Why are we seeing more and more of these chronic diseases all over the world? To solve a puzzle this massive, you've got to understand all the pieces first. And as we're about to see, the answer is, well, it's a lot more complicated than you might think. Okay, so first things first, let's just get a handle on the sheer scale of this challenge. We call it a silent epidemic for a reason. It doesn't explode overnight. Nope. This thing builds up slowly over decades, and it's driven by these huge fundamental shifts in how we all live our lives. And here's the thing. There's no single bad guy to point to. It's more like a perfect storm. For starters, we're all living longer, which is great, but it also naturally increases our risk. Then you have this massive, rapid shift of people moving into cities, which completely changes how we live and work. And of course, there's the globalization of, let's face it, unhealthy lifestyles. More processed foods, less active jobs. And if that wasn't enough, we've now seen firsthand how something like a pandemic can just throw a wrench in everything, disrupting healthcare and making these conditions even worse. So to even begin to fight back, public health experts have to get really smart about one key idea: risk. But here's the tricky part. Risk can mean two totally different things, depending on if you're looking at 1 million people or just one. At its core, risk is really just about probability. It's the mathematical chance that something might happen. It's a calculated guess, not a crystal ball that tells the future. And that difference between a likelihood and a guarantee, well, that's absolutely crucial. And here are the two sides of that coin. On one hand, you've got population risk. Think of this as the 30,000-foot view. It helps governments figure out big picture stuff, like where to build clinics or what public health campaigns to run. But then you have individual risk. That's your personal chance. It's informed by all that big data, sure, but it is not your destiny. It's a guide, not a sentence. This is such a powerful way to think about it. So when we see data that says smoking dramatically increases the risk of lung cancer, we're simply identifying a high-risk group. We're not saying that any one specific person who smokes is guaranteed to get sick. We just can't know that for sure. It's all about playing the odds. And it's in that gap between the probability for the group and the certainty for the individual, that's where our personal choices and medical advice really, really matter. So with such a massive and complicated problem, where do you even start? How do public health officials begin to tackle this? Well, it turns out they use a surprisingly simple and effective 3-step battle plan. And this strategy is honestly kind of brilliant in its simplicity. First, you assess the risk. You gather all the data you can. Then, step 2, you stratify that risk. And this is the game-changing part. Instead of treating everyone the same, you sort people into different buckets: low risk, medium risk, and high risk. And finally, step 3, you manage that risk with custom-tailored plans for each group. It's all about putting your limited resources where they're going to have the biggest, most life-saving impact. Okay, so having a strategy is one thing, but what does this look like on the ground? What tools are people actually using to measure something as fuzzy as a whole community's risk? It all kicks off with what you could call a reconnaissance mission. It's called a situational analysis. And the idea is before you do anything, you have to listen and learn. You need a complete 360-degree view of a community. What are the biggest health hurdles here? What strengths and resources are already in place? And what are the real-world barriers people are up against every day? And this analysis really looks at two big things. On one side, you have community capacity. Are people aware of the risks? Is there a good local support system? On the other side, you've got health sector capacity. Does the clinic have the right tools, the right medicine, enough trained staff? You absolutely need both of these to be strong. One without the other is just a recipe for failure. Then we zoom in, right down to the individual level. And here, doctors use a toolkit that you've probably seen before. They'll ask about your lifestyle, your diet, your family history. They'll take measurements. And more, they're using these really powerful risk calculators. A great example is the Find a Risk tool for diabetes. It takes all your personal info, crunches the numbers, and spits out a simple, easy-to-understand score that tells you your risk. So what's the big payoff here? Why go through all this effort to assess populations and stratify every single person? What does it actually mean for you and your health? I mean, that's the bottom line, right? How does all this high-level strategy and number crunching actually translate into you getting better care when you walk into the doctor's office?
The answer is so simple, but it's incredibly powerful. It's all about precision. It means we can target the right care to the right people at exactly the right time. It's a huge shift away from a one-size-fits-all approach to something that's way more intelligent and proactive. And this strategy has some major real-world benefits. It means that someone at high risk for a heart attack gets the extra support and frequent check-ins they need, while someone at low risk gets good advice on how to stay healthy. It lets doctors intervene early to catch problems before they become full-blown diseases. And, in a world where healthcare resources are always stretched thin, it makes sure that every dollar, every medicine, and every doctor's time is used as effectively as possible. At the end of the day, fighting this silent epidemic really requires a big shift in how we think about health. It's about focusing on prevention with the same energy and intensity that we focus on finding cures. It's about using data not just to treat people when they're sick, but to proactively chart a course for a healthier future for every single one of us. So it kind of makes you think, what's one small change you can make today to invest in your own healthier future?